Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven, and today our special guest is Ep142 Lukens. Ep142 is a New York Times bestselling author of YA speculative fiction, including the novels Love at Second Sight, Otherworldly, Spellbound, which was a 2024 ALA Rainbow Booklist. So this is Ever After, a 2023 ALA Rainbow Booklist and 2022 Goodreads Choice Awards nominee, and Deeper Waters, and the forthcoming The Last Best Quest Ever, as well as other strange fiction and fantasy works. Ep142 resides in North Carolina with their spouse, 3 kids, 3 dogs, and 3 cats. So welcome, Ep142.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into writing.
Well, I started writing at a very young age in elementary school, but I never thought I could actually be an author, be an actual professional writer until after I graduated college and
Wow.
was in a professional field. I was a social worker, for 20 years, and it was during that time that I felt like maybe I could actually write something. And I started writing like little short stories. I was in a couple fandoms and wrote for them. And then decided in 2015 I was in between jobs and I was like, I start my new job in like 2 months, so I'm going to do what I can. And I wrote the first novel and it was published by Interlude Press in 2016. And then from there I've just written 11, 12.
Oh my goodness.
So, one a year pretty much since.
Wow. So how do you write so quickly? Do you usually plan and then you just start or?
I'm not a fast writer. Like I write one a year, which is basically what I am able to do. Even with having left my job, and focused on this full time, I still am only able to do one book a year. Um, but yeah, I'm just a really big plotter. Once I come up with the idea, I sit down and plot out some scenes and think about what I want each character to do or what my overarching theme is, and then just kind of go from there. And I usually have really big post-it notes on my wall of what's happening in this chapter one, what's happening in chapter two, and going like that. So it doesn't always work, but that's how I do it now. In the beginning, I was using like note cards,
Mhm.
and then also was keeping a lot in my brain, but that no longer works. So I write everything down now.
Okay. And do you remember like what you first wrote? Was it always sort of speculative fiction, or do you started off with fandom, so was it more fantasy and then you explored other
Well,
genres?
even in elementary school when I was writing stories and stuff, it was always speculative. It was always fantasy or science fiction or anything in that kind of vein because I was a huge science fiction and fantasy nerd. And it was because my older brother was a huge science fiction and fantasy nerd, and he would bring like home movies and stuff, and we would watch them together. And he had D&D books underneath his bed that I would pull out and read. And he introduced me to Star Wars. He took me to Return of the Jedi when I was very, very, very little. I just so and but yeah, he always took me to like to different movies and introduced me to Star Wars and Star Trek. And when I was 13, and the only reason I remember this is because I actually have a picture of it. He sent me, because he had moved away, and he sent me a book for my birthday, and it was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Mhm.
And when my mother passed away in 2023, we were cleaning out her house, and we found a picture of me sitting in a chair holding the book up with the wrapping paper in my lap. So 13-year-old me holding up that book. And that was really the book that kind of brought in this aspect of humor
Mhm.
in science fiction and fantasy and what you can do with language and how weird you can make it and everything. So that was actually a really big influence for me.
Cool, cool. Now, do you find writing challenging to you at all? Like when you first did it, was it a challenge to get published or anything like that?
Well, it was a challenge to write that first book
Hmm.
because I didn't think I could write beyond a certain amount of words, you know, and there's like, oh, you have to write this many words for it to be considered a novel, and this is the word count you need if you're going to write in this genre versus this genre, you know, kind of thing. And I never thought I could like make like have a plot and have characters and stuff like that long enough to be able to write a novel. So the first one was very difficult, and it was really me just sitting down and going, this is what I want to do, and writing it out. And that was before like doing all the plotting and that kind of stuff. It was just kind of off the cuff. And so after I finished that one, I edited it and everything, and I actually queried it with agents, but nobody wanted it, which was fine. But Interlude Press, which was an independent press, very small, they liked it, and I ended up publishing 5 books with them. But the challenge was really that first book and knowing and figuring out how to actually write a full length, work and novel. Um, Now the problem is just attention. My problem is I get these ideas as I'm supposed to be working on something else, and I'm like, well, I want to work on this, but that's not on deadline. This is, so I need to
Yep.
write this. So that's I get very easily distracted with other ideas. So that's my challenge now, staying focused on one thing.
Okay, now let's talk about your latest book, The Last Best Quest Ever. Could you give us a little bit of a synopsis and tell us what's inspired it?
The last best quest ever is it's a fantasy novel about questing and found family, and there's a dragon who is the main character's best friend. It's about imposter syndrome, and basically the main character is the best quester in all the land, but it's totally fake. She's made everything up, and then her brother has gets in trouble, and she has to go on this quest to save him, and she's got to figure out how to do it because she's got people coming along with her that think she's the greatest. So it's really fake it till you make it. Um, and I really don't remember where it came from. I had read a bunch of books with dragons recently, and I was like, "Ooh, I've never written a dragon. I want to write a dragon." But I didn't want the dragon to be the main character, and I really didn't want the dragon to be part of the plot. So I was like, "Well, I'll make them like the best friend." So what would I need to do? And then I kind of came up with um, this main character who's fake, who's a
Hmm.
fraud. And then kind of went from there and what would be a great situation to put someone who's a fraud in, and like what kind of different creatures that I want to have, and what kind of different characters, who was going to be the love interest. And I wanted to write sibling relationships because I really love sibling
Hmm.
relationships because of my brother. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of where it all came from.
Okay, cool. Now, were there any like events in your life that sort of inspired anything for the book that, like you have a brother, that the sibling relationships, like anything that happened to you that you put in sort of?
Feeling like a fraud all the time.
You're a bestseller. You won awards.
Um, well, but like it's
Yeah,
imposter syndrome is
yeah.
it's very personal, but it's also like it's very prevalent among creative folks. And it's really like, I've worked so long and so hard to um have books that are in bookstores, and to be able to go do events and be on bestseller lists and that kind of stuff, and then when I've achieved it, and now I'm like, what do I do from here? And it's very um I don't know, it's just kind of thinking about like my place in publishing and my place in different communities, and do I really belong here? I mean, like all sorts of stuff. So yes, the imposter syndrome piece is very personal.
Now, what kind of things do you hope the reader takes away from the journey of your character?
Um, that perception is not always reality. And that the way people perceive you doesn't matter. It's the way that you want to live your life, the way you want to express yourself, the way that you want to be. And it doesn't have to be driven by other people's perceptions of you or what they want from you or the roles they set out for you. That's a big theme in a lot of my books is that, you don't have to adhere to what people, and by people, I mean like parents or broader society or government or anything like that. If you don't have to adhere to like the expectations that folks put out for you. And you can, uh, shake that off and be who you want to be. So, and that's really what the main character Eleanor goes through is because there's all these bards have written all these songs about her um and there's like all these stories about her great feats and she's like I didn't do any of these. How do I
Mhm.
how do I finally break out of this and tell these people that I didn't yeah, I made the dragon stop eating the sheep, but I didn't slay him. I became his friend. So how does she kind of tell folks that and let folks know that these kind of expectations and things they put on her aren't true?
Yeah, it almost sounds like they created like a mythology after they heard a little snippet of a story. At the
It's
same
ex
time, I have to admit, while having experience with people, even if you tell them the truth, they might not believe you anyways. So there's only so much you can do. So,
Yeah, that's true. And that's the thing is that that's a really great way. She was mythologized, like as a 17-year-old and there's she decides the very first beginning of the book, she decides to quit because she's like, I can't do this anymore. And she's also scared of being found out, because
mhm.
she has won all this gold and stuff from the kingdom. And if they found out that everything she's done is
Have to
fake,
give back your bank
um,
account. Yeah.
so she quits. And then she gets thrown in a situation where she has to live up to Eleanor the Brave.
Mhm.
Um, and she doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, talking about like new writers, do you have any advice that you were given that you can share to people that are trying to finish their book as well?
Um, one of my friends used to say, butt in chair, hands on keyboard, you know?
Yeah, pretty direct, yes.
But it's just about finishing. You can edit crap. You can't edit nothing. So it's really just about getting what you want onto the page and getting it down. You can always go back and
Mhm.
fix stuff. My life is editing a lot of
Yeah.
times, like I write a book, it's not perfect at all. That's why I have great editors that can come back and be like, oh, fix this, change this, move this around, kind of thing. And that's just really just finishing. And that's what kept me back for so long was I didn't think I could finish it. I didn't think I could write a whole work. So yeah, that's my advice is just do what you can to finish it. If you have to skip scenes and come back to them later, just get to that end so that you can edit, fix, rewrite, do what you need to before, you peter out and kind of lose the passion for the work.
Cool. Okay, so you're going to do a reading for us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're reading and then you can just start?
I'm gonna read the first couple pages of The Last Best Quest Ever. I have the arc, so this is not the finished copy, but I'm pretty sure that first chapter stays the same. Um, so I'm just going to start at the beginning, and 10 minutes is a long time, so it's probably gonna be the most of the chapter.
That's
So,
fine.
okay. I'm gonna start. If I had learned anything in my years of questing, it was that members of the royal court always appreciated a grand entrance. They were gluttons for pageantry and suspense. They salivated over any spectacle and devoured drama and pomp. And since the upper class didn't have to work for a living, unlike lowly peasants such as myself, they had endless hours to fill with various forms of entertainment. Gossip, secret liaisons, and treason were the normal fare, but even elaborate plans for a coup became boring after a while. Thus, they invented different avenues of distraction, diversion, and amusement. The kingdom's monarchs organized all manner of competitions and celebrations, much to the delight of the lords, ladies, and lieges of the court. They gorged themselves on lavish feasts, sophisticated fashion, and complicated dancing. And of course, there were tournaments. The monarchs loved to watch knights pummel one another with dull swords or spear one another with pointy sticks while hurtling at full speed on horseback. Unfortunately for the spectators, the court couldn't indulge in sword fights and jousting matches daily, or there would be no knights to defend against the threat of warlords, bandits, and the sporadic vengeful gnome. So they had to turn to other sources of daring entertainment, and that's where I came in. I was an expert at questing, the broad term for a variety of daring and courageous tasks, including monster hunting, magic or divine object retrieval or destruction, depending on the day, and the occasional VIR, very important royal recovery mission. Princess Avriel was very excited when I showed up to rescue her from the swamp sprites instead of Lord Ethan, as he harbored a very large and very unrequited crush on her, and had vowed to be her champion despite his utter lack of prowess when it came to feats of rescue or romance. Anyway, I was great at winning quest competitions, the best at it, in fact, in the entire kingdom, exalted throughout all the land. And though I wasn't someone who enjoyed prolonged attention, it was an act I was willing to play for the gold. For a time. With my vast experience in these matters, I knew that absolutely nothing topped a theatrical last-second entrance, which was how I came to be there, impatiently waiting outside the closed double doors of the castle's great hall for my final performance. I pressed my ear to the glossy, polished wood while I listened for the best moment to announce my arrival. If this was to be the last time I would enter the presence of royalty as the most decorated quest competitor in all of Avery, I would do so in style. Magnificent, boorish, boasting style, even if it meant upstaging my opposition, and especially if it irritated my fiercest competitor. Princess Avon was fun to tease. Well, as no one else has returned from the dark wood, the king's voice rang out, then I believe I must declare Princess Avon my cue. I rammed my shoulder against the heavy door so it swung wide open, startling the guards and the banner bearers and cutting the king off mid-sentence. The ornately carved handle slammed to the stone wall, the impact reverberating amid the gasps of the court as I took a brash step over the threshold. I swept my brown hair to the side, revealing my blood-splattered face, and tossed the tattered hem of my cloak over my shoulder to full effect. Between the sword at my side and my dirtied leather armor, I appeared gruesome and battle-worn as I stood proudly at the back of the hall, every inch the mighty adventurer the bards proclaimed me to be. "Sorry I'm late," I called as I strode in, lugging the heavy corpse of a monstrous spider behind me by its own web, which was kind of poetic in a macabre and gross way. I was a little caught up. The crowd stared at me in stunned silence. Caught up, get it? I sighed. The castle court had no sense of humor. The spider web? I jiggled the thick strands entwined around my hands for emphasis. A twitter of disgusted laughter echoed throughout the chamber, but abruptly changed to horrified gasp when one of the long, hairy legs of the spider twitched. The thud of a liege fainting followed shortly after. I gripped the sticky fibers I'd looped over my shoulder and dragged the creature across the stone with a foul scrape and squelch. The ribbon of carpet that led to the royal dais budged beneath the eight-legged carcass, while a wide swath of black blood and green, viscous venom seeped from beneath it, spreading outward toward the jeweled toes of the courtiers who pressed handkerchiefs over their mouths to ward off the stench. Yeah, it was dead. Very dead, despite the occasional post-mortem spasm. And it was heavy. I grinned as my gaze slid to Princess Avon. My stomach leaped gleefully at their attractive pout, their fair skin reddening with annoyance as they crossed their arms over their pristine royal outfit. Avon had a wheelbarrow of smaller spiders, adolescents compared with the one I was dragging toward the raised thrones of the kings and queen. Not a bad showing for the second best, and if I had been 1 minute later, they'd have won the challenge in the court's favor this time. There were other participants lined up behind Avon, some with a smattering of dead spiders and one with a large bat. Lord Ethan, with his ridiculous curled mustache, had obviously missed the entire point of the adventure, which was to cull the Darkwoods' man-eating spider population down to a manageable level. The dark wood was thick and wild, and during peak foliage season was so dense that light scarcely broke through the canopy of leaves. The populace accepted, oops, the populace thought it cursed, but the path cutting through it was the shortest way between the farms and ports at the northern edge of the continent and the rest of the kingdom. Taking the route through the wood took a third of the time it would take to venture around the perimeter, which for trader or farmer was no menial deviation. Unfortunately, the spider population had exploded as an unhappy herald of spring. I and my fellow questers had been tasked with bringing back as many dead creatures as possible to create a safer way through the wood for the prime trading months of the spring and summer. The reward was a sack of gold and the esteem of the kingdom. It was the perfect last quest, a way to earn a bit of gold and one last chorus of enthusiastic huzzas. I paused next to Princess Avon and bowed to the king and queen seated on their thrones atop the raised platform. The bulbous body of my bounty smelled like death, the stink wafting anew each time I moved it. It was positively vile, but the king stared delighted and the queen giggled as I dropped the web to the floor with a loud splat. I apologize for my tardiness, your majesties. I bowed again at the waist. This, I said with a gesture toward the body, was difficult to lug all the way from the depths of the dark wood. Avon rolled their blue eyes and dropped their arms with a soft huff. I ignored them, though I inwardly preened. You're forgiven, of course, Eleanor, the queen said, especially if you have brought a fine specimen. The king gestured to the stone wall behind them, where a gigantic bear rug hung above a recessed stone shelf. The ledge held a quill from a manticore, a magnificent pearl from the eastern sea, a silver thimble from the swamp sprites, and a scale from the famed golden dragon, about the size of a small shield, which gleamed in the sunlight. Yes, the fangs will make an excellent addition to the other trophies you have brought us. I internally flinched, but hid my distaste behind a wide smile. I agree, your majesty. One of the spider's brittle legs cracked and fell off, eliciting another waft of death so overpowering that I clamped my mouth shut to keep from vomiting. The king wrinkled his nose. A quite pungent creature. I laughed through my clenched teeth. Yes, well, it's dead. That's what happens. Of course, the king's gaze cut to Avon standing by my side. I was just about to declare my dear brother's only child, Princess Avon, the winner of this little competition, as they have killed the most spiders, but we cannot deny that once again you have prevailed. Wait, how did she win? Avon asked, gesturing to the corpse behind me. That's one spider. The quest was to kill many spiders, to decrease the population. 12 is much greater than one. Prince Avon does have a point, the king said, stroking his gray beard. He was a stately man, a warrior in his day, and the sharpness of his blue eyes were rivaled only by Avon's. The quest did specify quantity. Yes, Princess Avon does have a magnificent point, I said with a wink in their direction. And while this is but one spider compared with Princess Avon's bounty, this is a mother spider, and all her eggs are also now gone. Gone, but not dead. Merely relocated by a friend. But that bit of information would remain between myself, my friend, and the ancients. And she could not procreate again. Well done, Eleanor, the king cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. Once again, I hereby declare Eleanor the Brave, the Spider Slayer, the winner. She has triumphed in this quest. I beamed in spite of the name. I always despised epithets, but the Spider Slayer wasn't too awful. It was better than some of the other ones the king had bestowed on me previously. The crowd clapped politely as the rest of the competitors dispersed with grumbles and envious looks. Lord Ethan sniffed as he passed and checked his shoulder hard against mine, his steel armor knocking my already loose leather pauldron askew. That prick. He had a chip on his shoulder larger than the dragon scale displayed on the shelf. I think that's 10 minutes.
Sure, we'll call it 10 minutes. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to visit us today.
Well, thank you for having me. And that was from The Last Best Quest Ever, which is coming out in May.
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Helix Press. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.